Welcome to Common Ground. I'm Yuval David. Okay, let me speak to you about the psychology of following. Human psychology plays a decisive role in shaping public opinion. I call it the bandwagon effect. The bandwagon effect leads individuals to adopt beliefs because they appear to be popular. Social proof causes people to trust ideas endorsed by celebrities and influencers, for example. And today, algorithms amplify these tendencies. The algorithms on social media, so if a celebrity and influencer is sharing some sort of information and you follow that celebrity or influencer, you're likely to amplify whatever information they're sharing. Research from MIT, for example, has shown that false information spreads faster online than the truth. Social media platforms reward outrage, controversy, and emotional engagement. This creates a stark contrast between mission-driven voices grounded in knowledge, that's who I try to be, and attention-driven personalities chasing virality, which is what we see across social media. So let's talk about the stark contrast between mission-driven voices grounded in knowledge and attention-driven personalities chasing virality. In the attention economy, outrage is a currency. Virality is not validation. Influence is earned through credibility, not clicks. Yes, algorithms reward attention. Algorithms don't reward accuracy. Popularity does not equal truth. Many people aren't forming opinions, they're outsourcing their thinking. Seeing is no longer believing. Seeing is actually now suspect. Speaking of suspect, celebrities, power, and hypocrisy. Cultural power has become political power. Celebrities such as Mark Ruffalo, Susan Sarandon, Javier Bardem, John Cusack, Roger Waters, Dua Lipa, Macklemore, Bella and Gigi Hadid, Angelina Jolie, just as examples, have used their platforms to influence global political discourse. And in ways that I very much disagree with. Whether one agrees with the people I just mentioned or not, their activism demonstrates the immense reach of celebrity influence. This paradox is often described as what I like to call limousine liberalism. Right? They say that they're liberal, but they have the benefits of being the elites. So the paradox of limousine liberalism, benefiting from democratic freedoms while condemning the systems that enable success. Democracies are imperfect, but they are self-correcting. Authoritarian regimes silence dissent and punish opposition. Fame does not equal expertise. Celebrity is influence, not authority. Moral clarity requires knowledge, not just notoriety. Freedom makes criticism possible, and authoritarianism makes it dangerous. Applause is easy. Accountability is harder. Influence without understanding is irresponsibility amplified. And nowhere is this contradiction more visible than where I happen to be right now in Hollywood. An industry built on storytelling, on authenticity, on the filming principle of show, don't tell. And yet when it comes to politics and global issues, so many of the celebrities in the Hollywood industry do the exact opposite. They tell, they declare, they perform, but too often they do not show. Award shows have become political stages, from the Academy Awards to the Golden Globes to the Grammy Awards. Acceptance speeches are increasingly used not to reflect on craft, how these artists got there, who helped them, what the process is, and inspirational messages, but their acceptance speeches have become a place where they're either expected or they force in this way to deliver political messaging, slogans, declarations, very broad moral claims, often with little nuance, little context, and little to no accountability. Moments designed for applause, not analysis. So the question is not whether artists should speak out. Of course they should. The question is, are they actually informed? Are they consistent? Are they accountable to the consequences of what they say? And maybe we should track who is paying them to post, share, and speak about these causes and where that money is coming from. Because speaking is easy. Posting is easy. Hashtags are easy. But real-world impact, that requires something very different. Where is the sustained investment in the causes they champion? Where is the long-term engagement? Where is the policy understanding? Where is the show in an industry that prides itself on showing? Too often, what we see instead is alignment with trending narratives, amplified through social media, feeding directly into what I call Hashtag-Algorithm-Placard strategy. A cycle where a narrative trends, celebrities amplify it, influencers repeat it, audiences adopt it, and it becomes perceived truth. Not because it's been rigorously examined, but because it's been widely repeated. That is not leadership. That is amplification. And in many cases, it's amplification without consequence, because the same individuals who speak freely on global issues often do so from within societies that actually protect free speech, human rights, creative expression, protections that do not exist in many of the regimes or movements that they may knowingly or unknowingly defend. There's deeper irony here. An industry built on narrative, participating in narrative shaping without always interrogating the narrative itself. And when celebrity voices align with simplified, emotionally charged messaging, they don't just reflect public opinion. They shape it, they accelerate it, they legitimize it. Which brings me back to the concept of responsibility. Because with influence comes responsibility. And with reach comes consequence. Fame is not expertise. Celebrity is influence, not authority. Moral clarity requires knowledge, not notoriety. Freedom makes criticism possible, and authoritarianism makes it dangerous. Applause is easy. Accountability is harder. And in a world where narratives shape reality, those who shape narratives must be held to a higher standard. We're seeing a lot of extremes today in every part of society. So let's chat about the extremes and the ecosystem of disinformation. Disinformation does not belong to one ideology. It thrives at the extremes. On the far right, conspiracy theorists have spread false narratives that undermine democratic institutions. On the far left, extremist influencers have promoted distorted narratives about the United States, Israel, Zionism, and Western democracies. Events such as the January 6th attack on the US Capitol demonstrated the real-world dangers of misinformation and radicalization. Different ideologies, same tactic, narrative over truth. Extremism is not defined by direction. It's defined by distortion. Propaganda wears many uniforms. The loudest voices are not always the most truthful. When ideology replaces evidence, truth becomes collateral damage. Radical narratives thrive where critical thinking declines. And disinformation, and I said disinformation, that's purposeful misinformation. Disinformation is the common currency of extremism. But this is the problem that is no longer confined to the fringes, to the fringe actors, to the people, on the edges of society. But this problem is no longer confined to fringe actors in the fringes of society. It has moved into the mainstream. across television, digital media, and we see it on talk shows that are expected to inform the public. There's an increasing shift away from fact-based reporting and toward opinion-driven content. Panels designed not to clarify, but to provoke. Segments built for reaction, not reflection. Narratives framed to confirm audience bias, but not challenge it. Information is being presented, but interpretation is being prioritized over verification, where opinions are elevated and facts are often filtered through ideological lenses. I feel like I'm speaking in a very heavy manner here, so it's hard to unpackage because we're seeing this happening right before our eyes. This is where trust begins to erode, because when news becomes a performance and analysis becomes activism, the line between journalism and narrative shaping not only begins to blur, I feel like it's been blurred for a very long time. On the far left, emotional alignment often overrides analytical rigor. There's this tendency to respond based on perceived moral positioning without fully examining historical context, geopolitical realities, patterns of behavior, or long-term consequences. Emotion somehow has replaced examination, and when emotion leads without evidence, misinformation just spreads unchecked. In fact, too often we're seeing news sources that used to be reputable receiving and sharing information coming from, for example, Islamist and jihadist groups, and from other regimes in the world that spread disinformation, like from Iran, China, Russia. On the far right, a different but equally concerning pattern has emerged. There's a deep distrust of institutions, sometimes justified, but this deep distrust has evolved into wholesale rejection of verified information. What this created was fertile ground for conspiracy theories, simplified explanations, alternative realities, and narratives that confirm suspicion rather than challenge it. So these are different entry points, same outcome, detachment from fact-based reality. And when both extremes disengage from evidence, truth becomes negotiable. Now layer on something even more powerful, the rise of viral social media influencers, individuals with massive platforms, millions of followers who shape opinion in real time. And many of them are not journalists. They're not analysts. They're not experts. They're content creators. And their incentive structure is quite clear. Views, engagement, monetization. The algorithm rewards controversy, outrage, certainty, not nuance, not complexity, not truth. And when influence becomes monetized, information becomes a product, and audiences become consumers. There are influencers who are thoughtful, responsible, and informed, absolutely. But there are many others who have repeatedly demonstrated a disregard for accuracy, a pattern of sensationalism, a willingness to say what trends, but not what is true. And yet they continue to grow because attention, not accuracy, that's what's rewarded. This is where the danger becomes clear. When audiences trust voices that have not actually earned credibility because those voices are entertaining, emotional, or affirming, the audiences are not being informed, they're being influenced. That's why we call them influencers. And oftentimes they're being misled. Extremism is not defined by direction, it's defined by distortion. And propaganda wears many uniforms. The loudest voices are not the most truthful voices. And when you notice that ideology replaces evidence, that's truly where truth becomes collateral damage. Radical narratives thrive where critical thinking declines. So I'm going to repeat. Attention is not credibility. Influence is not integrity. And if someone profits from outrage, maybe you have to ask, are they informing you or using you?